The phone vibrated against the polished mahogany desk for the fourth time in 10 minutes. Dante Moretti didn't even glance at the screen as he reached over and silenced it, his attention fixed on the spreadsheets displaying his latest casino acquisition numbers. His wife's name, Aria, had been flashing across that screen all morning, but whatever she wanted could wait. The Salvatore family was making moves on his Upper East Side territory, and that required his complete focus. He had no idea that in 48 hours, he'd be staring at surveillance footage of his wife being dragged into a black van, her terrified voice screaming the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Dante, don't let them take me. Please. But that morning, as Manhattan's most feared crime boss, Dante Moretti was untouchable, powerful, and about to learn that all the money and muscle in the world meant nothing when you failed to protect the one person who actually mattered. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Aria Moretti stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse overlooking Central Park, one hand pressed against the glass, the other resting protectively on her barely visible baby bump. 6 months ago, she'd been Aria Chen, a social worker in Queens who believed everyone deserved a second chance. Now she was Mrs. Dante Moretti, living in a gilded cage 40 stories above the city, married to a man she barely recognized anymore. The autumn sunlight caught the flawless diamond on her finger, 5 carats, colorless, perfect. Dante had proposed with it after a whirlwind 3-month courtship that had felt like a fairy tale. He'd been attentive, protective, present. The man who'd walked into her community center looking to make a charitable donation had somehow seen past her thrift store clothes and student loan debt to the woman underneath. That man was gone now. In his place was a stranger who came home after midnight smelling of cigar smoke and expensive scotch, who took phone calls during breakfast, who looked at her with distant affection but rarely really saw her anymore. Aria tried his number again. Straight to voicemail. She'd been calling since 7 that morning, each time with increasing desperation. The text messages had started 3 days ago, anonymous, threatening, specific enough to be terrifying. We know about the baby. We know your routine. We're watching. Your husband took something from us. Now we'll take something from him. The brownstone on East 72nd. Tuesday at 3 p.m. Come alone, or your family in San Francisco learns what Dante really does. She'd shown Dante the first message. He'd barely looked up from his laptop. Probably some punk trying to scare you. I'll have security look into it. Then his phone had rung, and he'd walked away mid-conversation, leaving her standing there with her heart racing and her hands shaking. The second message had come while Dante was in Atlantic City on business. She'd called him 6 times before finally reaching his second-in-command, Marco, who'd assured her he'd pass along the message. Dante had texted back 4 hours later, "Security team is on it. Don't worry. Love you." The third message had arrived last night while Dante sat 15 feet away from her, focused on some contract dispute with the Salvatore family. She tried to interrupt 3 times. Each time, he'd held up one finger, "Just 1 minute, Aria," before returning to his heated phone conversation about territories and percentages in respect. Now it was Tuesday morning. The message had said 3 p.m. In 6 hours, she was supposed to go to some brownstone in Manhattan, alone, to meet people who were threatening her unborn child. And her husband, the man whose entire empire was built on protecting what was his, couldn't be bothered to answer his phone. Aria's hand trembled as she dialed one more time. This time, she didn't leave a voicemail. Instead, she sent a text. "Dante, I'm scared. Please call me. It's about the threats. I need you." The response came 2 minutes later, in a meeting. "Call you in an hour." An hour. She looked at the antique clock on the mantel. 8:37 a.m. By the time he called her back, by the time she explained everything, by the time he took her seriously enough to actually do something about it, it might be too late. Aria walked to their bedroom and pulled out the small leather journal she'd been keeping since the wedding. Inside were notes, observations, the slow documentation of her husband's transformation from the attentive man who'd courted her to the distant stranger who now shared her bed. August 15th, Dante missed our 3-month anniversary dinner. Said the casino opening couldn't wait. Didn't come home until 4 a.m. September 3rd, tried to tell him about the baby today. He was on the phone for 2 hours straight. Finally just sent him a text. He responded with a thumbs-up emoji. September 28th. Asked him to come to my doctor's appointment. He said he'd try. He didn't show. Saw our baby's heartbeat alone. October 12th. The threat started today. She closed the journal and looked around the master bedroom that felt more like a luxury hotel than a home. Everything was perfect, expensive, cold. The silk sheets Dante had imported from Italy. The custom closet filled with designer clothes she never wore. The original Monet hanging above the fireplace that cost more than her parents' house. None of it mattered. None of it kept her safe. None of it made her husband actually see her. Aria made a decision. She walked to the security panel by the door and disabled the alarm, something Dante had shown her how to do in case of emergency. Then she grabbed her purse, her phone, and the can of pepper spray her sister had given her as a wedding gift, half joking about marrying into a crime family. She wasn't going to the brownstone on East 72nd. She was going to Dante's office in Midtown. She was going to walk past his secretary, past his security, past every single person who stood between her and her husband, and she was going to make him listen. Because the baby growing inside her deserved a father who would protect them. And the woman she used to be, the one who believed in second chances and redemption, she deserved better than being ignored. The elevator ride down 40 floors felt like descending into another world. In the lobby, their building's concierge smiled at her. "Good morning, Mrs. Moretti. Shall I call for your car?" "No, thank you, James. I'll take a taxi." His eyebrows rose slightly. Mrs. Moretti never took taxis, but he simply nodded. "Have a lovely day, ma'am." The October air hit her face like a slap as she stepped onto Fifth Avenue. Manhattan moved around her with its usual chaos. Tourists snapping photos, business people rushing to meetings, street vendors calling out their wares. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that the elegant woman in the cream cashmere coat was married to the man who controlled half the illegal gambling in the city. Aria raised her hand to hail a cab, and that's when she noticed the black sedan parked across the street. Tinted windows, engine running. The same black sedan that had been parked outside their building yesterday. And the day before that. Her blood ran cold. She turned quickly and walked back toward the building entrance, her heels clicking rapidly on the concrete. Behind her, she heard a car door open. "Don't run," she told herself. "Don't let them know you're scared." But her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip her phone as she dialed Dante's number again. "Pick up. Please, God, pick up. You've reached Dante Moretti. Leave a message." "Dante," she whispered, walking faster now, her voice breaking. "There's a car following me. Black sedan, no plates visible. I'm coming to your office. Please, I need you to." A hand grabbed her elbow. Aria spun around, pepper spray already in her hand, but it was just James, the concierge, looking concerned. "Mrs. Moretti, are you all right? You look pale." She was breathing too fast, her vision starting to narrow. The black sedan was still there, still running. Were those men inside? Were they waiting for her to be alone? "I need." She couldn't finish the sentence. The world tilted sideways, and James caught her arm. "Let's get you back upstairs, ma'am. I'll call Mr. Moretti immediately." "No," Aria managed. "Take me to his office. Please. I need to see him in person." 20 minutes later, Aria sat in the back of a Blacktown car. Not the sedan that had been following her, but one of Dante's fleet vehicles that James had insisted on calling, watching Midtown Manhattan pass by in a blur of steel and glass. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Running won't help. We'll find you anywhere. 3 p.m. Don't be late." Her hands shook as she typed a response to Dante. "Please. I'm coming to you. Don't send me away. I'm scared." This time, there was no response at all. Dante Moretti's office occupied the entire 45th floor of a Midtown skyscraper, with views that stretched from the Hudson River to the East River. But Dante wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at the 3 men seated across from him, the Salvatore brothers, and calculating exactly how much blood would be spilled if this negotiation went wrong. "Your casino is on our territory," Vincent Salvatore said, his Boston accent thick with barely contained rage. "You don't expand into Hell's Kitchen without our permission." "Hell's Kitchen hasn't been yours in 5 years," Dante replied calmly, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Not since your father got sloppy and lost it to the Russians. I bought it from them. Legally. Legally. Vincent spat the word like a curse. You think contracts mean anything in our world? Dante's phone buzzed on the desk. Aria's name flashed across the screen for what felt like the 100th time that morning. He declined the call without looking away from Vincent. Contracts mean everything, Dante said. That's what separates us from animals. We have rules. Structure. Your father understood that. Maybe if you'd spent less time partying in Miami and more time learning the business, you'd understand it too. The youngest Salvatore brother, Tony, lunged forward in his seat. You smug son of a... Tony! Vincent's hand shot out, stopping his brother. We're here to negotiate, not to start a war. He turned back to Dante, his eyes cold. Give us 20% of the casino's profits for the next 5 years, and we'll call it even. Dante almost laughed. 20%? For territory you don't own. For permission I don't need. He leaned back in his chair. I'll offer you 5% for 2 years. Take it or leave it. Vincent's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake, Moretti. You think you're untouchable because you've been on top for a few years. But empires fall. Thrones get taken. And when that happens, when you finally have something you actually care about losing, that's when you'll understand why respect matters. Something in Vincent's tone made Dante's instincts flare. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. Vincent stood, his brothers following suit. Think about my offer. But don't think too long. The world changes fast when you're not paying attention. As the Salvatore brothers walked toward the door, Dante's secretary, Maria, appeared in the doorway, looking flustered. Mr. Moretti, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your wife is here. She's very upset and insists. Tell her I'll call her in 20 minutes, Dante said, already turning back to his computer screen where the Hell's Kitchen Casino's profit projections glowed. I need to finish this. Sir, she's crying. She says it's an emergency. Dante felt a flash of irritation. Everything was an emergency with Aria lately. The baby hormones made her emotional about everything. A sad commercial, a delayed dinner reservation, a missed phone call. He loved his wife, but her timing was terrible. Maria, I'm in the middle of something. Have security take her to the conference room and get her some water. I'll be there in 30 minutes. But Mr. Moretti... 30 minutes, Maria. His secretary disappeared, and Dante returned his attention to the numbers on his screen. The Hell's Kitchen Casino was projected to generate $40 million in its first year. 20% of that would be $8 million, money he'd essentially be handing to the Salvatores for doing nothing. 5% was generous. 2 years was more than fair. His phone buzzed again. Another call from Aria. Then a text, please. I'm coming to you. Don't send me away. I'm scared. Scared. Aria was always scared lately. Scared of the security cameras. Scared of the bodyguards. Scared of the lifestyle she'd married into. Maybe he should have married someone from their world. Someone who understood the realities of power and violence. Someone who wouldn't fall apart every time he had to handle business. But then he thought of Aria's smile, the way she'd looked at him when he'd proposed in Central Park, the genuine goodness that radiated from her like light. That's why he'd married her, because she was untouched by his world, pure in a way nothing else in his life was. He'd protect her. He always protected what was his. But right now, he had more pressing concerns. Dante spent the next 25 minutes restructuring his offer to the Salvatores, calculating how much he could afford to give without appearing weak, determining the minimum amount that would prevent an all-out war. When he finally stood and walked toward the conference room, it had been 37 minutes since Aria had arrived. The conference room was empty. Maria, Dante called out, walking back to her desk. Where's my wife? His secretary looked up, confused. She left, sir. About 10 minutes ago. She waited for 25 minutes, but when you didn't come, she said she had somewhere she needed to be. Did she say where? No, sir. But Mr. Moretti. Maria hesitated. She looked terrified. I think something's really wrong. For the first time that morning, Dante felt a cold tendril of real concern snake through his chest. He pulled out his phone and called Aria's number. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. Aria, it's me. I'm sorry I kept you waiting. Come back to the office. We'll talk. He paused. Whatever's going on, We'll handle it together. Just come back. He hung up and immediately dialed his head of security, Marcus. My wife just left the building. Where is she? She got into a taxi heading south on 6th Avenue about 8 minutes ago, boss. You want me to follow her? Yes. Now. And send me her location from her phone. On it. Dante paced his office, waiting for the location ping. When it came through, he stared at the address in confusion. East 72nd Street. A residential block on the Upper East Side. What was Aria doing there? He called her again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. The cold tendril of concern became a knot of dread. He pulled up the surveillance footage from the building lobby and watched Aria enter 37 minutes ago. Even on the grainy security camera, he could see she was shaking. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. This wasn't pregnancy hormones. This was genuine terror. And he'd made her wait. Dante's phone rang. Marcus. Boss, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Your wife got out of the taxi on East 72nd. There was a black sedan waiting. 4 men got out. She tried to run, but they grabbed her. Threw her in the van. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. The floor dropped out from under Dante's world. What? She's gone, boss. They took her. What do you mean they took her? Dante's voice was deadly quiet. She has a security detail. Where the hell were they? She disabled the building security this morning and took a taxi instead of her usual car. By the time we realized she'd left, it was too late. The kidnapping happened 4 minutes ago. We're tracking the van now, but boss. Marcus hesitated. It's the Salvatores. I'm almost certain. Dante's vision went red. The Salvatores. Vincent's parting words echoed in his mind. When you finally have something you actually care about losing, that's when you'll understand why respect matters. They'd taken his wife. His pregnant wife. The woman who'd been calling him all morning, begging him for help, telling him she was scared, and he'd been too fucking busy to listen. Find her, Dante said, his voice like ice. Burn down every Salvatore property in this city if you have to. Call in every favor, activate every contact. I want my wife back in 2 hours, or Vincent Salvatore dies screaming. Boss, there's something else. Marcus's voice was grim. We pulled the security footage from outside your building. Your wife was being followed for at least 3 days. Same black sedan, same men. They've been planning this. 3 days. Aria had been in danger for 3 days, and Dante had been too absorbed in casino profits and territorial disputes to notice. His hand clenched around his phone, so hard the screen cracked. Send me everything. Every piece of footage, every license plate, every face. And Marcus! Dante's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. If anything happens to her or my child, there won't be enough pieces of the Salvatore brothers left to bury. As Dante grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator, his phone buzzed with a video message from an unknown number. His hands shook as he opened it. The video was only 10 seconds long. Aria, sitting in what looked like a basement, her wrists zip-tied behind her back, her face streaked with tears. She was looking directly at the camera, her voice breaking as she spoke. Dante, please. They said if you don't give them what they want, they'll... Her voice cut off as someone off camera yanked her hair back. Don't let them take me. Please. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough. I'm sorry. The video ended abruptly. Dante stood frozen in the elevator, watching those 10 seconds over and over. Aria's terrified eyes. Her trembling voice. The way she'd apologized, as if any of this was her fault, as if she hadn't spent the entire morning begging him for help while he ignored her. Don't let them take me. But he already had. The emergency meeting in Dante's penthouse conference room was already in full swing when he arrived, his knuckles still bleeding from where he'd punched through the marble wall of his office elevator. 12 of his most trusted men surrounded the table, soldiers, enforcers, his inner circle, all of them staring at the freeze-frame image from the kidnapping video projected on the screen. Aria's terrified face filled the wall, her mouth open mid-plea, her eyes wide with fear. Talk! Dante commanded, his voice barely controlled. Marcus stepped forward, tablet in hand. The van was found abandoned in Queens 30 minutes ago. Burned out. No usable evidence. They switched vehicles, probably multiple times. We're checking traffic cameras, but what? But the Salvatores know our surveillance capabilities. They planned for it. We're looking at a ghost trail. Dante's jaw clenched. Then we don't chase the trail. We go straight to the source. He turned to his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Angelo. Send a message to Vincent Salvatore. Tell him he has 2 hours to return my wife unharmed, or I'm coming for his entire family. His mother. His sisters. Everyone. Boss, Angelo said carefully, if we go after his family, this becomes a full-scale war. Blood in the streets. Civilian casualties. The commission will get involved. I don't give a fuck about the commission. Dante slammed his fist on the table. They took my wife. My pregnant wife. There are rules. Family is off limits. Rules they're clearly willing to break, Angelo replied. Which means they're either desperate or they think they can get away with it. Either way, we need to be smart about this. Dante forced himself to breathe, to think. Angelo was right. Charging in blindly would get Aria killed. But every second she spent in their hands was a second she was in danger, a second she was terrified and alone, believing her husband had failed to protect her. Because he had failed to protect her, his phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. This time it was a text. Your wife is safe. For now. If you want her to stay that way, bring $50 million in bearer bonds to the address we send you. Come alone. You have until midnight. 50 million. It was a massive amount, but Dante could get it. He'd liquidate everything if he had to. But the come alone part was a trap. They'd kill him and keep Aria anyway, or kill them both to send a message to anyone else who tried to expand into Salvatore territory. Another text came through. Oh, and Dante? Your wife says the baby's a boy. Congratulations. It would be a shame if he never got to meet his father. The baby's a boy. Aria had been trying to tell him. Probably for days. Maybe that's what all those phone calls had been about. And he'd ignored every single one because he was too busy negotiating over gambling profits. A son. He was going to have a son. If Aria survived. Boss, we have something. Marcus's voice broke through his thoughts. One of our street cameras caught a partial plate on the second vehicle. We ran it through our database. It's registered to a shell company that the Salvatores have used before, but he hesitated. The company was dissolved 6 months ago, right after Vincent's father died. Dante looked up sharply. So either Vincent's sloppy or this isn't the Salvatores at all, Angelo finished. Someone wants us to think it's them. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If it wasn't the Salvatores, then who? And why frame them? Dante's mind raced through possibilities. The Russians he'd bought Hell's Kitchen from? The Irish mob he'd pushed out of the Bronx? The Chinese triads whose heroin operation he'd dismantled last year? He'd made countless enemies on his rise to power. Any one of them could want revenge. But the timing was too perfect. The Salvatores had been in his office threatening him just hours before Aria was taken. Either it was the most convenient coincidence in history, or someone had been watching him closely enough to know exactly when to strike. Pull up every security feed from my building for the past week, Dante ordered. I want to know everyone who came within 100 feet of Aria. Cross-reference with known associates of every family we've had conflict with in the past year. As his men scrambled to execute the order, Dante walked to the window overlooking Central Park. Somewhere out there, Aria was being held captive, believing her husband didn't care enough to save her. The woman who'd called him 20 times that morning, who'd come to his office begging for help, who'd waited in that conference room for almost half an hour before finally giving up and walking into a trap. He'd sent her away. He told the secretary he needed 30 minutes to finish some goddamn spreadsheet while his pregnant wife sat in the next room, terrified and alone. His phone rang. Angelo handed it to him. It's Vincent Salvatore. Dante answered, his voice ice cold. If you hurt her. Hurt who? Vincent sounded genuinely confused. Moretti, what the hell are you talking about? Don't play games with me. Give me back my wife, or I swear to God. Your wife. Vincent's confusion shifted to alarm. Dante, I don't have your wife. Why would I take your wife? That's against every rule we have. You told me this morning that I'd understand respect when I finally had something to lose. 3 hours later, my wife is kidnapped. You think I'm stupid. I think you're panicking and not thinking clearly. Vincent's voice turned serious. Moretti, I swear on my father's grave, I didn't touch your wife. Taking a man's family, that's a line even we don't cross. You want to fight over territory? Fine. But this isn't me. Something in Vincent's voice rang true. Dante had known the man for years, had negotiated with his father, had learned to read the subtle tells that indicated lying. Vincent sounded genuinely shocked. Then who? Dante demanded. I don't know, but whoever did this wants us at each other's throats. Think about it. You and I go to war over this, we both lose. Our organizations bleed each other dry, and someone else moves in to pick up the pieces. Dante's mind cleared as the bigger picture snapped into focus. Vincent was right. This wasn't about ransom money or territorial disputes. This was about destroying the two most powerful families in New York by turning them against each other. I need your help, Dante said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. I need your surveillance, your street contacts, every resource you have. Done, Vincent replied immediately. Your wife is innocent in all this. We'll find her. As Dante ended the call, Marcus approached with a laptop. Boss, you need to see this. The screen showed security footage from outside Dante's building, timestamped 3 days ago. A black sedan parking across the street. A man getting out, making a phone call while watching the building entrance. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but it caught enough of his profile for facial recognition. His name is Dmitry Volkov, Marcus said. Former Russian intelligence. He works exclusively for one person. Dante's blood ran cold. Kozlov. Alexei Kozlov. The Russian oligarch whose money laundering operation Dante had exposed to the FBI 2 years ago, resulting in Kozlov's entire American assets being seized, and the man himself fleeing to Moscow to avoid arrest. Kozlov had sworn revenge, but Dante had assumed the threat was empty posturing from a man who'd lost his power base. Apparently not. Kozlov doesn't care about money, Angelo said quietly. He cares about suffering, about making you feel the same loss he felt, which meant the $50 million ransom was a distraction. They didn't want money. They wanted Dante to know what it felt like to lose everything that mattered, and they wanted him to feel responsible for it. Another video message arrived on Dante's phone. This time, when he opened it, his hands were steady. He needed to see this. He needed to know exactly what was happening to his wife, so he could make the people responsible pay in equal measure. The video showed Aria in a different room now, still zip-tied, but no longer alone. A man's voice spoke off camera, heavily accented. Russian. Mr. Moretti, your wife is very beautiful. Very brave. She keeps asking about you, wanting to know if you received her messages. The camera panned to show Aria's face, bruised now, her lips split. I told her you were busy. Too busy to answer her calls. Too busy to protect her. Is this true? Aria's eyes found the camera, and even through her fear, there was something else there. Disappointment. Resignation. As if she'd finally accepted that her husband had chosen his empire over her. She doesn't believe you're coming, the voice continued. She thinks you don't love her enough to save her. Perhaps she's right. Perhaps you should let her go, find a new wife. One less fragile. The video ended. Dante stood motionless, his entire world reduced to those final seconds of footage. The look in Aria's eyes. Not just fear, but the death of hope. She thought he'd abandoned her. After 9 hours of being held captive, of waiting for rescue that hadn't come, she'd given up on him. And why wouldn't she? He'd ignored her calls all morning. He'd made her wait in that conference room. He'd failed to notice she was being stalked for 3 days. What reason did she have to believe he'd save her now? I'm going to kill them, Dante said quietly. Every single person involved in this. I'm going to make it last days. Weeks. I'm going to make them beg for death. First we have to find her, Marcus reminded him. Kozlov's smart. He won't keep her in any of his known properties. Could be anywhere in the tri-state area. Dante looked at the frozen image of Aria's battered face on the screen. His wife, the woman who believed in him when he was nothing, who'd seen good in him despite everything he'd done. The woman carrying his son. He'd failed her in every way that mattered, but he'd get one more chance to prove she was wrong to give up on him. One more chance to show her that when it came to the people he loved, Dante Moretti would burn the entire world to ash. Get me everything we have on Kozlov's known associates in New York, Dante ordered. Safe houses, business fronts, everyone who might owe him a favor. We have, he checked his watch, 14 hours until midnight. That's 14 hours to find Aria and end this. And if we don't find her by midnight? Angelo asked. Dante's eyes were cold as winter. Then we make them wish they'd killed me instead. The brownstone on East 72nd Street looked abandoned from the outside, windows boarded, paint peeling, a foreclosure notice faded on the door. But in the basement, under layers of soundproofing and reinforced steel, Aria Moretti sat in a metal chair bolted to the concrete floor, trying not to think about how long she'd been there. 8 hours, maybe 9. The windowless room made time impossible to track. Her wrists were raw from the zip ties, her shoulders screaming from being pulled behind her back for so long. The split lip throbbed with every heartbeat, a reminder of when she tried to fight back during the kidnapping. She'd stopped crying an hour ago. Tears required hope, and Aria had finally run out. The door opened. The Russian, Dmitri, she'd heard the others call him, entered with a bottle of water and a protein bar. He cut the zip ties on her wrists and stepped back, hand resting on the gun at his hip. "Eat," he said. "Mr. Kozlov wants you healthy." Aria's hands shook as she opened the water bottle. Every instinct screamed not to accept anything from her captors, but the baby needed hydration. The baby came first, even if its father apparently didn't care enough to answer his phone. "How long are you going to keep me here?" she asked, her voice hoarse from screaming earlier. "Until your husband learns his lesson." Dmitri leaned against the wall, watching her with clinical detachment. Mr. Kozlov is very patient. He waited 2 years for the right moment to strike. He can wait a few more days. Days. Aria's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, to the barely visible bump that held her son. "I'm pregnant. Please. Whatever my husband did to your boss, I had nothing to do with it. Let me go." "The baby makes it better," Dmitri said casually. "More painful for your husband. Mr. Kozlov lost his son when your husband destroyed his business. Federal agents seized everything, including the medical treatments his boy needed. Experimental cancer therapy, very expensive. The boy died 6 months later. Aria's blood ran cold. Dante told me he exposed money laundering. He never said anything about a sick child. Perhaps your husband doesn't tell you everything." Dmitri smiled without warmth. "Perhaps he is not the hero you think he is." The protein bar turned to ash in Aria's mouth. Was it true? Had Dante's crusade against Kozlov's operation indirectly killed a child? She thought of all the conversations they'd had about his business, how he'd always been vague about the details, changing the subject when she pressed too hard. "I protect you by keeping you separate from my work," he'd said once. "You don't need that darkness in your life." But maybe the real reason was that she wouldn't have married him if she'd known the truth. If she'd understood that his empire was built on the ruins of other people's lives, including innocent children. "My husband will come for me," Aria said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "He'll pay whatever you want. We don't want money." Dmitri checked his watch. "We want him to suffer, to know what it feels like to lose everything, to be powerless to stop it." He looked at her with something almost like pity. "And from what I've seen today, we're succeeding. He hasn't even tried to find you yet." The words hit like a physical blow. 9 hours. Dante had known she was missing for 9 hours, and there'd been no rescue attempt. No demands for proof of life. No frantic negotiations. Just silence. Maybe Dmitri was right. Maybe Dante didn't care enough to save her. Maybe she'd been fooling herself all along, believing the fairy tale of the powerful man who'd fallen in love with the humble social worker. Maybe she'd just been a trophy to him, a pretty distraction from the violence and darkness of his real life. The door burst open, and another man entered, older, gray-haired, with the bearing of someone accustomed to giving orders. Alexei Kozlov himself, Aria realized. The man whose son had died because of her husband. "Mrs. Moretti." Kozlov's English was excellent, barely accented. "I apologize for the crude accommodations. This is not how I prefer to treat a lady, especially one in your condition." Aria said nothing. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of begging. "Your husband cost me everything," Kozlov continued, circling her chair slowly. "My business, my reputation, my freedom. But worst of all, he cost me my son. 12 years old, brilliant kind. He needed medical treatment that cost $2 million every 3 months. When the FBI seized my assets, the treatment stopped. Nikolai died in agony, asking me why I couldn't save him. Despite herself, Aria felt a twist of sympathy. A parent's grief was universal, even when that parent was a monster. I'm sorry for your loss. Are you? Kozlov stopped in front of her. Because your husband wasn't. When I sent him a message about my son's death, do you know what he said? He said that actions have consequences. That I should have thought about my family before I chose a life of crime. Kozlov's eyes hardened. So now I'm teaching him the same lesson. Actions have consequences, Mr. Moretti. And you are his consequence. Aria's mouth went dry. You're going to kill me. Eventually. But not quickly. Not mercifully. Kozlov gestured to Dmitri, who produced a phone and began recording. First, I'm going to send your husband videos. Every day a new one. Each one showing him exactly what his choices have cost. And when he's suffered enough, when he's begged enough, when he's destroyed enough of his own empire trying to find you, then I'll let him watch you die. The camera's red light blinked at her, and Aria understood that this was it. This was the moment where she either gave up or fought, where she either accepted her fate or refused to let these men see her break. She thought of the baby growing inside her, Dante's son, a child who deserved a chance to live, even if his father was too busy to save his mother. Dante, she said directly to the camera, her voice steady despite her terror. I don't know if you're watching this. I don't know if you care. But our son, your son, he's innocent in all of this. Whatever you have to do to save him, do it. Even if it means letting me go. Even if it means giving these men what they want. Our baby deserves a chance to live. She paused, tears finally breaking through her composure. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to protect him on my own. I'm sorry I needed you and you weren't there. But please, don't let our son die because you were too proud or too busy or too. Dmitri shut off the camera. Enough! Kozlov nodded approvingly. Very touching. Your husband will appreciate the sentimentality. Dmitri, send it to him. Then prepare the next room. I want her moved every 6 hours. Moretti's men are good, but not good enough to track her if we keep moving. As they zip-tied her wrists again and pulled a hood over her head, Aria whispered a prayer she hadn't spoken since childhood. Not for herself. She'd accepted that she probably wouldn't survive this. But for her son. For the tiny life growing inside her that deserved better than parents who were too broken to protect him. The hood smelled like gasoline and old sweat. Strong hands lifted her from the chair, carrying her toward an uncertain destination. And in the darkness, Aria finally understood what Dante must have felt all those times he'd chosen business over family. The crushing weight of knowing that no matter what choice you made, someone you loved would suffer for it. Meanwhile, across the city, Dante Moretti watched the latest video for the 7th time, his knuckles white around his phone. Don't let our son die because you were too proud or too busy or too. The video cut off, but the words echoed in Dante's mind. Too proud, too busy, too much of a coward to admit that he'd failed the one person who'd ever believed in him. We got a location from the video metadata, Marcus said, pulling up a map on the large screen. The IP address traces to a series of routers, but we managed to narrow it down to a 3-block radius on the Upper East Side. Dante studied the map. Residential neighborhood, expensive real estate, dozens of potential hiding places. How many properties in that radius are owned by shell companies or have recent ownership changes? 17. We're running background checks on all of them now. We don't have time for background checks. Dante grabbed his coat. We hit all 17. Simultaneously. 2-man teams, full tactical gear. Anyone who resists gets neutralized. Boss, Angelo said carefully, if we're wrong, if we kick down the wrong doors, we're looking at major exposure. Police involvement. Media coverage. The kind of attention that brings down empires. I don't care about the empire. Dante's voice cracked. My wife, my pregnant wife, is being tortured by a man who wants to watch her die slowly, and you're worried about media coverage? Angelo met his eyes steadily. I'm worried about Aria's chances of survival if we spook Kozlov into killing her before we find her. We get one shot at this, Dante. We need to be smart. Dante forced himself to breathe. Angelo was right. Charging in blindly had gotten Aria kidnapped in the first place. He needed to think like the strategist he trained himself to be, not the terrified husband he'd become. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. We narrow it down. Marcus, pull security footage from every camera in that 3-block radius for the past 4 hours. Look for vans, unusual traffic patterns, anything that suggests they moved her. As his team scrambled to execute the order, Dante's phone rang. Vincent Salvatore. We found something, Vincent said without preamble. One of my street guys saw a black, van matching the description, entering an underground parking garage on East 74th. Residential building. Only 3 units occupied, all owned by the same shell company. Dante felt his pulse quicken. What company? Red Star Holdings. Registered in the Cayman Islands 6 months ago. No visible connection to Kozlov, but the timing fits. And get this, the building security system went offline 3 hours ago. Someone doesn't want anyone seeing what's happening inside. Send me the address. Dante was already moving toward the door. And Vincent? Thank you. Find her, Vincent said. Then we'll figure out who's really behind this and make them pay. 20 minutes later, Dante stood in the tactical van 3 blocks from the target building, surrounded by 12 of his best men. All of them were armed, all of them were ready to die for him if necessary. But Dante had made it clear, Aria's safety came first. If there was any risk to her, they pulled back and regrouped. Thermal imaging shows 4 heat signatures on the 3rd floor, Marcus reported, studying the scanner. 3 males, 1 female. The female's heart rate is elevated but stable. Aria. She was alive. Scared, but alive. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. What's the entry plan? Angelo asked. Front door would be suicide. They'll have it monitored and booby-trapped. Dante studied the building schematics on the tablet, but the building was renovated 2 years ago. They converted the old laundry chute into a utility shaft. It runs from the basement to the top floor. Boss, that shaft is barely 2 feet wide. Then we send our smallest guy. Dante looked at Rico, a lean 19-year-old who'd proven himself in the organization through sheer fearlessness. You comfortable with tight spaces? Rico's grin was feral. Like I was born in a coffin, boss. Good. You go up the shaft with a fiber optic camera. Eyes on Aria's exact location, guard positions, any weapons you can spot. The rest of us breach from the stairwell the moment Rico gives us the layout. It was a solid plan. Not perfect, but better than the alternatives. As his team geared up, Dante checked his phone one more time. The video of Aria played automatically, her voice steady despite her fear. Our son, your son, he's innocent in all of this. A son. Dante was going to have a son. A boy who would grow up either knowing his father was a hero who saved his mother, or knowing his father was a coward who let them both die. Sir, we have a problem. Marcus's voice was tight with tension. Police dispatch just got a call about suspicious activity at that address. 2 squad cars are en route. ETA 4 minutes. Dante's mind raced. If the police showed up, Kozlov would know he'd been found. He'd kill Aria and disappear before anyone could stop him. But if Dante's team breached now, without proper reconnaissance, they risked walking into a trap. 4 minutes. Enough time to get Rico in position, but not enough time to properly plan the assault. Change of plans, Dante said. Rico, you go now. Get eyes on Aria in the next 3 minutes. The rest of us create a perimeter and intercept those police cars. We need to delay them long enough to get Aria out. How exactly do we delay police without making this worse? Angelo asked. Dante pulled out his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. It was answered on the first ring. Commissioner Hayes, a gruff voice answered. This better be important, Moretti. I need a favor, Dante said. And I need it now. Thomas Hayes, the NYPD commissioner, owed Dante more favors than he could count. Evidence that had conveniently disappeared. Investigations that had stalled at crucial moments. Promotions that had been greased through the system. Dante had bought and paid for Hayes' cooperation years ago. Now it was time to collect. There are 2 squad cars heading to East 74th Street, Dante continued. I need them rerouted. False alarm. Equipment malfunction. I don't care what excuse you use. What's going on at that location? Hayes asked suspiciously. My wife is being held there. If your officers show up, the men inside will kill her. So you have a choice, Commissioner. You can help me save an innocent woman's life, or you can explain to the media why the NYPD got a pregnant woman killed. There was a long pause. You have 10 minutes, Moretti. After that, I can't hold them back without raising questions I can't answer. 10 minutes is all I need. As Rico disappeared into the utility shaft, his body camera streaming footage to Dante's tablet, the rest of the team moved into position. 3 minutes later, Rico's whispered voice came through the comm system. I've got eyes on the target room. 4 hostiles. Your wife is in the northeast corner, zip-tied to a radiator. She's conscious but looks injured. I count 2 assault rifles, multiple handguns. And boss, they're packing up. Moving equipment, erasing hard drives. I think they're planning to relocate her again. Dante's blood ran cold. If Kozlov moved Aria to a new location, they might never find her again. This was their only chance. Everyone in position, he asked over the comm. A chorus of affirmatives came back. On my mark, we breach. Rules of engagement. Anyone between us and Aria goes down. No hesitation, no mercy. But nobody fires unless they have a clean shot. If there's any risk of hitting my wife, you pull back. Understood. Another chorus of affirmatives. Dante checked his watch. They'd been there for 8 minutes. 2 minutes until the police arrived, whether Hayes could delay them or not. 2 minutes to save Aria or lose her forever. Rico, we're coming to you. Stay in position and cover our 6. Copy that, boss. Dante took a deep breath, checked his weapon one final time, and gave the order that would either save his family or destroy everything. Breach. The explosion of the door was the most beautiful sound Aria had ever heard. She'd been drifting in and out of consciousness, her body shutting down from stress and dehydration, when the concussive blast snapped her back to awareness. Shouting in Russian. Gunfire. The acrid smell of cordite filling the room. Through blurred vision, she saw Dmitri grab an assault rifle and aim it toward the door. Then his head snapped back in a spray of red, and he crumpled to the floor. More gunfire. More bodies falling. And then, cutting through the chaos like a lighthouse through fog, Dante's voice. Aria! She tried to respond, but her throat was too raw, her body too weak. The zip ties had cut off circulation to her hands hours ago, and she could barely feel her fingers. Then he was there, kneeling beside her, his hands shaking as he cut through the zip ties with a knife. His face was spattered with blood, not his own, she realized, and his eyes were wild with something she'd never seen before. Fear. Dante Moretti, the most powerful crime boss in New York, was terrified. I've got you, he was saying, his voice breaking. I've got you, baby. You're safe now. You're safe. Aria collapsed into his arms, and for the first time in 14 hours, she let herself believe it might be true. Dante was here. He'd come for her. Despite everything, despite her doubts, he'd come. Our son, she whispered against his chest. Is he? We're getting you to a hospital right now. Dante scooped her up as if she weighed nothing, carrying her toward the door while his men formed a protective perimeter around them. Angelo, call Dr. Rashid. Tell her we're bringing Aria in through the private entrance. I want a full trauma team standing by. Dante, Aria managed, her hand clutching his jacket. Kozlov. He's still. Kozlov's gone. He wasn't here. Dante's jaw clenched. But we got his men. And we'll find him. I promise you, Aria, he will never touch you again. The journey from the building to the armored SUV was a blur of movement and shouted orders. Dante never let her go, holding her against his chest, as if she might disappear if he loosened his grip. In the vehicle, he cradled her head in his lap, his fingers gently brushing her hair back from her bruised face. I'm sorry, he said quietly, so only she could hear. God, Aria, I'm so sorry. You called me 20 times. You begged me for help. You came to my office, and I made you wait because I was too busy looking at fucking spreadsheets. Aria looked up at him, seeing tears streaming down his face. In 3 years together, she'd never seen Dante cry. Not at their wedding. Not when they'd lost their first pregnancy last year. Not ever. You came for me, she whispered. That's what matters. I was almost too late. His voice cracked. When I saw that video, when I heard you say goodbye to our son. Aria, if anything had happened to you, if I'd lost you because I was too stupid to answer your calls. But you didn't lose me. She raised a trembling hand to his cheek, wiping away his tears. I'm here. We're both here. The SUV pulled up to a private medical facility in Murray Hill, one of many that existed solely to treat people in Dante's world who couldn't risk going to regular hospitals. Dr. Rashid was waiting at the entrance with 2 nurses and a wheelchair. Get her inside, the doctor ordered. I want a full examination, blood work, ultrasound. Mr. Moretti, you'll need to wait in. I'm staying with her, Dante said flatly. Dr. Rashid looked ready to argue, then saw the expression on Dante's face and simply nodded. Then scrub in. I need your hands clean if you're going to be in my examination room. 20 minutes later, Aria lay on a hospital bed while Dr. Rashid moved an ultrasound wand over her stomach. Dante stood beside her, gripping her hand so tightly it almost hurt, his eyes locked on the monitor. There, Dr. Rashid said, adjusting the image. There's the heartbeat. The rhythmic whooshing filled the room, and Aria felt Dante's entire body sag with relief. Their son was alive. Despite everything, the kidnapping, the stress, the trauma, their baby had survived. Strong heartbeat, Dr. Rashid continued, making measurements on the screen. No signs of distress. You're extremely lucky, Mrs. Moretti. Given what you've been through, this could have ended very differently. How's Aria? Dante asked. Injuries. Dehydration, minor contusions, some rope burns on her wrists. Nothing that won't heal. But I want to keep her here for observation. At least 24 hours. The emotional trauma alone. Whatever she needs, Dante interrupted. Money is no object. The best care available. Dr. Rashid gave him a look that suggested money was the least of Aria's needs, but she simply nodded. I'll set up a private room. Mr. Moretti, a word in the hallway. Dante squeezed Aria's hand. I'll be right back. Don't leave this bed. As if she had the strength to go anywhere. Aria closed her eyes, listening to the steady beep of the fetal monitor, the proof that her son was safe. She'd done it. She'd survived long enough for Dante to find her. But as relief washed over her, so did something else. Anger. Hurt. The memory of sitting in that conference room at Dante's office, waiting while he dealt with business that was apparently more important than her desperate pleas for help. In the hallway, Dr. Rashid pulled Dante aside, her expression grave. Your wife is physically stable, she said quietly. But Mr. Moretti, the psychological trauma from this experience, it's going to take more than a few days to recover from. She's going to need therapy, support, and most importantly, she's going to need to feel safe. Can you provide that? I can protect her, Dante said immediately. Triple the security detail, move to a safe house, whatever it takes. That's not what I mean. Dr. Rashid cut him off. I mean emotional safety. The kind that comes from having a partner who's present, who answers when she calls, who prioritizes her well-being over business interests. Dante's jaw tightened. You don't understand the pressures. I understand perfectly. The doctor's voice was steel. I've been treating people in your world for 20 years. I've seen wives become casualties of their husbands' ambitions more times than I can count. Your wife survived a kidnapping today, but if you don't change how you treat her, you'll lose her anyway. Maybe not to bullets, but to divorce. Or worse, to the slow death of a loveless marriage where she's just another possession to guard. The words hit Dante like a punch to the gut. Was that what Aria had become to him? A possession? Something to protect and display, but not actually cherish? He thought of all the phone calls he'd ignored, the anniversary dinner he'd missed, the doctor's appointment where she'd seen their son's heartbeat alone, the morning she tried to tell him about the baby, and he'd been too busy to listen. How do I fix this? He asked quietly. That's between you and your wife, Dr. Rashid replied. But my advice, start by actually being there. Not just physically present, but emotionally available. And Mr. Moretti, if you can't do that, if you can't put her first even after what happened today, then the kindest thing you could do is let her go. When Dante returned to Aria's room, she was sitting up in bed, her hand resting on her stomach. She looked so fragile in the hospital gown, bruises darkening on her pale skin, her blonde hair tangled and matted. But her eyes, when they met his, were clear and sharp. "We need to talk," she said. Dante pulled a chair to her bedside, preparing himself for whatever anger or recrimination was coming. He deserved all of it. "I thought you weren't coming," Aria said quietly. "For the first 6 hours, I kept telling myself you'd find me any minute. But when hour 7 came, then 8, then 9, I started to accept that maybe you didn't care enough to look." "Aria, let me finish." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I know you're busy. I know your business is dangerous and demanding. But Dante, I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child. And today, when I needed you most, you chose a meeting over me. You chose a negotiation with the Salvatores over answering my calls." "I know," Dante said, his voice rough, "and I will regret that choice for the rest of my life." "Will you?" Aria's eyes searched his face. "Or will you do it again the next time business seems more urgent than I am?" The question hung in the air between them. Dante wanted to promise that everything would change, that today had taught him what really mattered. But words were easy. Aria deserved more than empty promises. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I've spent my entire adult life building my empire. It's who I am, how I define myself, and I'm terrified that if I step back, if I delegate too much, everything I've built will collapse." "Then let it collapse," Aria said simply. Dante stared at her. "What?" "If you have to choose between your empire and your family, let the empire collapse. Because Dante, our son is going to need a father who's actually there for him. Not someone who shows up once a week for family photos but is too busy to remember his name." She paused, tears sliding down her cheeks. "And I need a husband who loves me more than he loves power. If you can't be that person, if you can't change, then maybe Dr. Rashid is right. Maybe the kindest thing would be to let me go." The thought of losing Aria, of letting her walk away with his son, felt like a knife to the chest. But hadn't he already been losing her? Day by day, phone call by phone call, missed moment by missed moment. "I want to change," Dante said. "I want to be the man you need, but I don't know if I know how." "Then learn." Aria's hand found his. "Go to therapy. Delegate more. Set boundaries between work and family. I'm not asking you to give up everything you've built. I'm asking you to make room for us in your life. Real room. Not just the scraps of time left over after you've handled every business crisis." Dante looked down at their joined hands, his scarred and stained with violence, her small and delicate despite everything she'd endured. She was offering him a chance. One more chance to be the man she'd fallen in love with. "Okay," he said. "Okay. I'll do it. Whatever it takes." "Don't promise me," Aria said, echoing the words Elena had said to Marco in the inspiration video. "Show me." Aria was released from the medical facility after 36 hours of observation. Dante had stayed with her the entire time, sleeping in the chair beside her bed, holding her hand through nightmares, being present in a way he hadn't been in months. It was a start, but Aria knew from experience that starts didn't always lead to finishes. The safe house Dante had chosen was a sprawling estate in Westchester, 45 minutes from Manhattan, surrounded by 15 acres of wooded land and guarded by a dozen armed men. It was beautiful and isolated and felt exactly like the cage Aria had been trying to escape. "It's temporary," Dante said as they drove through the gates. "Just until we neutralize the Kozlov threat. Then we can go back to normal life." Normal life. Aria almost laughed. What was normal about being married to a crime boss? What was normal about living under armed guard, knowing your husband's enemies would happily kill you to hurt him? But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she looked out the window at the autumn leaves and tried to imagine raising their son in this world of violence and paranoia. The house itself was stunning, modern architecture blending seamlessly with the natural landscape, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the forest. But Aria noticed the bulletproof glass, the reinforced doors, the security cameras hidden in every corner. A prison, no matter how beautiful, was still a prison. "Mrs. Moretti." A stern-looking woman in her 50s approached as they entered. "I'm Helen Kowalski. Mr. Moretti has hired me as your personal security detail and companion. I'll be staying in the guest suite next to yours." Aria glanced at Dante. "I need a babysitter now." "You need protection," Dante corrected. Helen was Secret Service for 20 years. If Kozlov's men somehow get past the perimeter, she'll keep you safe. I can keep myself safe. Aria's voice was sharper than she intended. I'm not helpless, Dante. I know you're not. But humor me. He took her hands, his expression pleading. Please, Aria. I can't lose you again. I can't go through another day like yesterday. And there it was, the raw fear in his eyes that made it impossible to say no. Dante had been traumatized by her kidnapping just as much as she had. Maybe more, because he'd spent those hours imagining the worst while being powerless to stop it. Okay, she relented. But Helen stays out of our bedroom. A ghost of a smile crossed Dante's face. Deal. The first week at the safe house passed in a strange kind of limbo. Dante worked from home, his office filled with laptops and encrypted phones, but he made a visible effort to be present. Breakfast together every morning. Lunch on the terrace when the weather was nice. Dinner at 7, no phones allowed at the table. But Aria could see the strain it caused him. The way his fingers twitched toward his phone when it buzzed. The tension in his shoulders when Angelo called with updates. The barely concealed frustration when she interrupted his work to ask about baby names or nursery colors. He was trying. She had to give him credit for that. But trying and succeeding were two different things. On the 8th day, Aria was reading in the library when raised voices from Dante's office pulled her attention. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear in argument. A serious one. Helen appeared at her side like a ghost. Mrs. Moretti, perhaps we should take a walk in the gardens. I want to know what's happening, Aria said. Your husband is handling business. It's better if you don't. I'm not a child, Helen. Aria stood, her hand resting on her growing bump. And I'm tired of being protected from information that directly affects my life. She walked to Dante's office and knocked once before entering. Dante, Angelo, and Marcus all turned to look at her. The video conference screen behind them showed Vincent Salvatore's grim face. Aria, Dante said, his tone carefully neutral. This isn't a good time. When is a good time? She challenged. You've been locked in here for 3 hours. I want to know what's happening. Dante exchanged glances with Angelo, then sighed. We found Kozlov. Aria's heart skipped. Where? He has a compound in the Catskills. Fortified, heavily guarded. We've been running surveillance for the past 48 hours. And? Aria pressed. And we're planning an assault, Vincent said from the screen. Tomorrow night. Hit him fast and hard before he realizes we found him. Aria looked at Dante. You're going. It wasn't a question. She could see it in his eyes, the grim determination of a man preparing for war. I have to, Dante said. As long as Kozlov is alive, you're in danger. Our son is in danger. This ends tomorrow night. Or you die tomorrow night, Aria countered. Dante, you have a dozen men who could handle this. You don't have to be there personally. Yes, I do. Dante's voice was steel. Kozlov targeted you to hurt me. This is personal. I need to look him in the eye when I end him. Aria felt cold dread settle in her stomach. This was exactly what she'd feared, Dante's need for control and revenge overriding common sense and safety. And what happens to me and our son if you don't come back? She asked quietly. The question hung in the air. On the screen, Vincent shifted uncomfortably. Angelo found something fascinating to look at on his tablet. Only Marcus met her eyes, and his expression was sympathetic. I'll come back, Dante said. I promise you, Aria. I will end this thread and come back to you. You promised you'd answer your phone when I called, Aria said. You promised you'd come to my doctor's appointment. You promised a lot of things, Dante. Why should I believe this promise is different? The words landed like slaps. Dante flinched, and Aria saw real pain in his eyes. But she couldn't back down. Not when her husband was planning to walk into a death trap because his pride demanded personal revenge. Mrs. Moretti, Vincent said carefully from the screen. I understand your concerns, but Kozlov has made it clear that he won't stop until either Dante is dead or you are. Tomorrow night, we have the element of surprise. We have superior numbers. If we wait, we lose both advantages. Then send someone else, Aria pleaded. Send Angelo. Send Marcus. Send an entire army. But don't send my husband. I'm going, Dante said firmly. This isn't up for negotiation. Everything in a marriage is up for negotiation. Aria's voice rose. Or is that just what you tell me when you want me to accept something I hate? The argument continued for another 10 minutes before Aria finally gave up and left the office. She found Helen in the kitchen, preparing tea as if the world wasn't falling apart upstairs. "He's going to get himself killed," Aria said, sinking into a chair. "And our son will grow up without a father." "Mr. Moretti is very capable," Helen offered. "I've seen a security team train. They're professionals." "They're criminals playing soldier," Aria countered. "This isn't some business dispute or territory negotiation. This is war, real war, against a man who's already proven he's willing to kill innocents." Helen set a cup of chamomile tea in front of her. "What do you want me to say, Mrs. Moretti? I want you to tell me I'm wrong, that Dante will be fine, that this will all work out." Aria wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "But you won't, will you? Because you know the truth. Men like Dante, men who can't let go of their pride long enough to delegate, they always end up dead or in prison." "Not always," Helen said quietly. "Sometimes they learn. Sometimes love changes them. And if it doesn't..." Aria felt tears burning her eyes. "If Dante goes tomorrow night and doesn't come back, what am I supposed to do? Raise our son alone. Teach him that his father died because revenge was more important than family." Helen didn't answer, because they both knew there was no good answer. That night, Aria lay in bed beside Dante, listening to him breathe in the darkness. He thought she was asleep, but she'd been awake for hours, her mind churning through scenarios and possibilities. If Dante died tomorrow, she'd be alone. Wealthy, yes. He'd made sure she had access to accounts and assets, but alone nonetheless. A widow at 28, raising a son who would never know his father. If Dante survived but Kozlov escaped, they'd spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, moving from safe house to safe house, living in fear. If Dante survived and killed Kozlov, would anything really change? Or would there just be a new enemy, a new threat, a new reason for Dante to choose violence over family? "I know you're awake," Dante said quietly in the darkness. Aria didn't respond immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with unshed tears. "I'm scared. I know." Dante pulled her closer, his hand resting protectively on her bump. "But I promise you..." "Don't promise me anything else," Aria interrupted. "Just come back. Whether you get Kozlov or not, whether you win or lose, just come back alive. Because our son needs his father. And her voice broke, "I need my husband." Dante kissed the top of her head, and Aria felt wetness on her hair. He was crying again, this man who never cried, this powerful crime boss who could order deaths without blinking but couldn't handle the thought of losing his family. "I love you," he whispered. "More than my empire. More than my pride. More than anything." "Then prove it," Aria said. "Don't go tomorrow. Send Angelo. Stay here with me and our son. Choose us." But even as she said it, Aria knew it was useless. Dante was going to the Catskills tomorrow night. He was going to face Kozlov, and no amount of pleading would change his mind. Because despite everything, despite the therapy suggestions, the promises to change, the tearful reconciliation in the hospital, Dante Moretti was still the man who'd built an empire on fear and violence. And men like that didn't delegate revenge. They took it personally, even if it killed them. The dawn broke cold and gray over the Westchester estate. Aria stood at the bedroom window, watching frost form delicate patterns on the bulletproof glass, her hand resting on the swell of her belly where their son kicked restlessly. Behind her, she could hear Dante in the bathroom, the sound of running water, the ritual of preparation before battle. Today was the day. In 12 hours, her husband would either come home victorious or not come home at all. She barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the video Kozlov had sent, Dimitri's cold execution, the casual violence, the promise of worse to come. Dante was walking into a fortress owned by a man who'd already proven he had nothing left to lose. The bathroom door opened. Dante emerged dressed in black tactical gear, a Kevlar vest strapped across his chest. He looked like a soldier preparing for war, which, Aria supposed, was exactly what he was. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, not turning from the window. "You know that, right? You have a choice." Dante crossed the room and stood behind her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. If I don't end this today, Kozlov will keep coming. He'll wait weeks, months, years if he has to. And eventually, he'll find an opening, a moment when you're vulnerable, when our son is vulnerable. And if you die today, Aria finally turned to face him. What then? At least if you're alive, even if Kozlov is still out there, our son has a father. But if you go to the Catskills and don't come back, he has nothing. I have nothing. Dante's jaw tightened. I'm not going to die. You can't promise that. Aria's voice broke. You can promise to try. You can promise to be careful. But you can't promise you'll survive an assault on a fortified compound defended by professional killers. Then what do you want me to do? Dante's frustration was evident. Sit here and wait for Kozlov to make his next move? Live our lives constantly looking over our shoulders? Is that the childhood you want for our son? I want our son to have a living father. Aria's voice rose. I want him to grow up knowing the man who created him, not just hearing stories about the crime boss who died seeking revenge before his child was even born. The argument was interrupted by a knock on the door. Angelo entered, his expression grim. Boss, we need to leave in 30 minutes to make the rendezvous point on time. The team's ready. Dante nodded. I'll be down in 20. After Angelo left, the silence in the room was suffocating. Aria and Dante stood facing each other, the distance between them feeling like miles rather than feet. I can't lose you, Aria whispered. Not after everything we've been through. Not when we're finally starting to fix things. You won't lose me. Dante pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I promise you, Aria. I will come back to you and our son. This ends today, and then we can finally start our lives together. Really start them. No more threats. No more fear. Just us. Aria Moretti stood in the bedroom doorway, her pregnant belly prominent beneath her silk robe, watching her husband prepare for what might be his final mission. Dante Moretti, one of New York's most powerful mob bosses, was about to lead an assault on Alexei Kozlov's compound in the Catskills, a mission driven by revenge for the Russians' previous kidnapping of Aria and the death of Kozlov's son, Nikolai, 2 years prior. The tension between husband and wife was palpable. Aria had begged Dante not to go personally, to send someone else, to prioritize his family over his pride. But Dante, bound by the code of his world, insisted this was something he had to do himself. The conversation that morning revealed the deep fracture in their relationship, a crack that had formed when Dante had ignored Aria's desperate phone calls during her first kidnapping, choosing a business meeting over her safety. There's something I need to tell you, Aria said, her voice steady despite her fear. If you don't come back today, I'm leaving New York. I'm taking our son and moving back to San Francisco near my family. I'm not raising him in this world, Dante. Not surrounded by violence and bodyguards in constant danger. The ultimatum struck Dante like a physical blow. The idea of losing his son was unbearable, but Aria's logic was undeniable. If he died in pursuit of revenge, she would take their child somewhere safe, somewhere far from the violence that defined his world. And if he survived, then they would need to have a serious conversation about what kind of life they wanted for their family. Dante's response revealed the depth of his internal conflict. He had spent 15 years building his empire from nothing, a kid from Brooklyn who had fought for every territory, every business, every ounce of respect. How could he walk away from that? Yet Aria challenged him with a simple truth. What good was an empire if it cost him his family? I don't know how to be anything other than this, Dante admitted. This is who I am, who I've always been. Then maybe it's time to figure out who you want to become, Aria replied. Because the man I married wouldn't sacrifice his family for revenge. He wouldn't leave his pregnant wife to storm a fortress. He'd find another way. As Dante prepared to leave, Aria made one final plea. If it comes down to a choice between killing Kozlov and coming home alive, choose to come home. Don't die for revenge, Dante. Please. Our son needs his father more than he needs his father's enemies dead. Their goodbye was desperate and intense, filled with unspoken fears that this might be the last time they saw each other. Dante promised his love, declaring that Aria and their son were the best things that ever happened to him. Her response was simple and devastating. Then act like it. Come home. The Kozlov compound was exactly as described in the intelligence reports, a converted hunting lodge on 200 acres in the Catskills, surrounded by high fences, guard towers, and enough firepower to withstand a small army. Thermal imaging showed 33 hostiles inside. Dante had brought 18 men, supplemented by Vincent Salvatore's 12. The numbers weren't favorable, but they believed they had surprise on their side. They were wrong. At the rendezvous point 5 miles from the compound, Vincent Salvatore voiced his concerns. "This is insane. Even with our combined forces, we're outnumbered. This isn't some street fight. This is a coordinated assault on a fortified position. People are going to die today." Vincent's questions echoed Aria's warnings. Was Dante's pride worth the lives of his men? Was personal revenge worth the risk of leaving his pregnant wife widowed? But Dante had committed to this path, and second-guessing would only make things worse. Then came the devastating news. Motion sensors had picked up activity inside the compound. Kozlov knew they were coming. Someone had tipped him off, and the element of surprise was gone. Dante made the decision to attack immediately, in broad daylight, rather than wait and give Kozlov time to prepare or escape. Angelo protested, calling it suicide, but Dante knew if they retreated, Kozlov would disappear again. This was their only chance. Before the assault began, Dante called Aria. The conversation was brief and heartbreaking. He tried to say goodbye, but she wouldn't let him. "Don't say goodbye. You promised me you'd come home." He told her he loved her more than his empire, more than revenge, more than anything. Her response was simple. "Then prove it. Come home." The assault began with coordinated attacks on multiple entry points. Team 1 hit the front gate, creating a distraction. Dante led Team 3 through the west fence, heading directly for the main building where Kozlov was reportedly located. For a brief moment, the plan seemed to be working. Then everything went wrong. The doors of the main building burst open, and guards poured out with military precision. This wasn't a compound defense, it was an ambush. Kozlov had known exactly when they were coming and had positioned his forces perfectly. The assault turned into a killing field. Rico, the young 19-year-old member of Dante's crew, was shot in the shoulder. Another man, Paul, took 3 rounds to the chest and dropped dead. A third went down screaming with a shattered femur. Dante ordered a retreat, but they were pinned down, outgunned, and running out of options. Vincent Salvatore's team crashed into the fight from the flank, saving Dante's men from complete annihilation. In the chaos, Dante saw Alexei Kozlov himself standing in a second-floor window, watching the carnage with cold satisfaction. Their eyes met, and Kozlov raised a phone to his ear. Dante's own phone buzzed. A video message from an unknown number showed Aria's bedroom at the safe house. The window was open. The bed was unmade. Her phone sat on the bedside table, still playing its lullaby ringtone. But Aria was gone. The timestamp showed the video had been recorded 15 minutes earlier. While Dante had been preparing for the assault, while all his security was focused on protecting the compound approach, someone had slipped past the perimeter and taken his wife. Again, a text message from Kozlov followed. "Did you really think I'd be stupid enough to wait for you here? This compound is a distraction, Moretti. While you've been playing soldier, my team has been collecting what really matters. Your wife sends her regards. Oh, and she says the baby's kicking. What a shame he'll never meet his father." The revelation crushed Dante. He'd sacrificed everything, his wife's trust, his men's lives, any chance of a normal future, for revenge against a man who had outplayed him at every turn. Aria had been right. She begged him not to come, to send someone else, to choose his family over his pride. And he'd ignored her, just like he'd ignored every warning sign that his obsession with power was destroying what actually mattered. Angelo dragged Dante to cover as bullets flew past. The entire assault had been a setup. Kozlov was probably hundreds of miles away, laughing at them. And while Dante had been too busy trying to prove he was the toughest man in New York, Kozlov had taken the only thing Dante truly cared about. Dante ordered a full retreat. The wounded were extracted, the dead were abandoned, and both teams melted back into the forest. Behind them, Kozlov's men didn't pursue. They'd already accomplished their goal. In the SUV, racing back to the city, Dante received a call from Helen, the head of security at the safe house. Her voice was thick with pain. They'd come through the woods, a 4-man professional team that hit during the shift change when the perimeter was weakest. 6 guards were dead before anyone knew there was an attack. By the time Helen reached Aria's room, she was already gone. Helen had been shot 3 times but would survive. The attackers had left a message carved into the wall of Dante's bedroom. Aria was payment for Nikolai Kozlov's life. Kozlov intended to return her in pieces. 1 piece for every month his son had suffered before dying. 6 months of torture before finally killing her. These weren't common criminals. They were ghosts. No DNA, no fingerprints, no trace evidence. Professional operators who knew exactly what they were doing. Kozlov had spent 2 years planning this revenge, studying Dante's operation, finding its weaknesses, preparing the perfect trap. And Dante had walked into everyone like an amateur. Angelo asked the critical question, "What's the play?" Kozlov would have anticipated that they'd figure out the compound was a trap. He'd have Aria somewhere they couldn't find her, somewhere they hadn't thought to look. Then Dante had an insight. Kozlov wasn't moving her this time. That had been the mistake during the first kidnapping. Too much movement created opportunities for rescue. This time, he'd keep her in one place, somewhere unexpected, somewhere with no connection to him. Dante called Vincent Salvatore with a theory. When Vincent's father died, what happened to his secret properties? The ones that weren't officially part of the business. Every paranoid mob boss kept safe houses nobody knew about. What better place for Kozlov to hide Aria than a forgotten safe house owned by a dead mob boss? Vincent agreed to pull property records for everything connected to his father's name, shell companies, and family connections. If Kozlov was using one of their old locations, they would find it. Another video arrived from Aria's phone. This one showed her in a new location, concrete walls, industrial lighting, the distant sound of dripping water. She was zip-tied to a chair, her face swollen, one eye blackened, her lips split and bleeding. Despite her injuries, her voice was steady and strong. She spoke directly to the camera, directly to Dante. "Dante, if you're watching this, I need you to hear me. Really hear me. Our son is still alive. I can feel him kicking. But these men, they're not going to let us survive. Not both of us." Her words cut through Dante like a knife. "So I need you to promise me something. When you find us, and I know you will, because you're too stubborn to quit, I need you to save our son. Not me. If it comes down to a choice, you cut me open and you save him. Do you understand? Our baby gets to live even if I don't." Dante whispered no to the empty car, but Aria continued. "I love you. Despite everything, despite the anger and disappointment and fear, I love you. You were the best mistake I ever made. And our son, he's going to be amazing. Just promise me you'll tell him about me. Tell him his mother loved him enough to die for him." The video ended abruptly. Aria had given up hope of her own survival. She was already planning for her death, already making peace with leaving their son motherless. And it was entirely Dante's fault. Angelo asked the question no one else dared. "And if we don't find her in time?" Dante's response was absolute. "Then I burn this entire city to the ground until I do." At 3 a.m, Dr. Rashid, the physician who had treated Aria after the first kidnapping, called Dante. He had a patient, a Russian with a gunshot wound who wouldn't give his name but was terrified, saying he wasn't supposed to hurt the woman, that Kozlov had promised it would be quick and clean, not torture. The man was dying. He had maybe an hour left. Dante raced to Dr. Rashid's clinic in Murray Hill. The Russian on the examination table was young, pale, and fading fast. Dante made him an offer. Tell him where Aria was, and he'd ensure a peaceful death with morphine. He'd also put the Russian's family under protection, so Kozlov couldn't retaliate against them. The dying man studied Dante's face, searching for lies. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him. "Red Hook," he whispered. "Old warehouse. Near the grain terminal. Basement level 3. She's in the surgical suite." The words surgical suite made Dante's blood run cold. The Russian explained Kozlov's horrific plan. He wanted the baby. Planned to raise it as his own, to replace the son Dante had killed. But Aria wouldn't cooperate, so they were going to cut the baby out of her. Tonight, Dante took down the names and locations of the Russians' family members. Dr. Rashid recorded everything. As the man's voice faded, the doctor administered a heavy dose of morphine. The Russian's eyes fluttered closed, his breathing becoming easier even as his life slipped away. "Thank you," Dante said quietly to the dying man. You saved them both.